I looked up the definition for free thinking or free thought. I'm mistaking the two, free thinking. But I'm just paraphrasing this. It's basically someone who forms their thoughts without using societal structures like religion, for example, or what else did I see? But that's a big one, especially in the Gambia that we live in, where I think the idea of free thinking is closely monitored by religion, where you don't really have that much room to really express yourself because a lot of things are taboo in our society, which culture has a big role to play in that as well, because we know our religion and our culture is so closely knit that it's hard to differentiate what's religion and what's not. So what we want to understand is, what does free thinking is? What does it mean? What does having a free thought means, without using the religion or without bringing religion or culture into this? For the one who wants to know what free thinking is, without how would I put this? C'est ko xamantene moom free thinking is not rooted from a religious belief.
Yeah, it's
right?
From a logical point of view.
From a logical point of view, and logic is, like I said, logic is not biased. Logic has no friend. Logic is either it's logical or it's not. There's no in between. But free thinking is a little bit tricky, I think. So, what do you have to comment on that?
I think when we free thinking as a concept appears at a certain stage in European history, the term itself.
Right.
I mean, like you were mentioning, it's about religion, because you have to remember that Europe passed through Christendom, what they call the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, where the Catholic Church has the chokehold on thought. And you could think about Galileo, when he was imprisoned and the Catholic Church asked him to renounce the fact that he said the earth is spherical and it's not flat, because the church has maintained that the earth is flat. So the free-thinking people appeared in that society, within that worldview, to say, why don't we also have reason and think and rationalism as a central category of human activity, as opposed to having orthodoxy, some sort of tradition that we are supposed to confine our thinking within these frameworks and within these categories. So so it appears as a sort of a contradiction to orthodox religious thinking in that society at that time. But when you look at the course of human history, there's always been people who have defied the norm. Like even when you look at, let's say, the rise of Semitic religion, Jesus or Moses or Muhammad appearing at a certain time in history, they were free thinkers. They were iconoclastic, because the free thinker is an iconoclast. I know that's a very big word, but an iconoclast.
You have to break it down for us,
an
for us and the viewers.
For all of us.
So so let's say the crucifix, the cross, or the pictures of Mary in the Catholic Church are called icons. So the iconoclast is the one who breaks those things. That's the literal meaning. But now, as a metaphorical meaning, it means someone who breaks the norms.
Right.
Yeah. So these people were iconoclastic figures who appeared at a certain point in history because they couldn't. I mean, when we're looking at it from a rational point of view, not from a revelational point of view. A revelation will tell us that these people have appeared because God wants them to deliver His message.
Right.
But from a rational point of view, Muhammad appears in a society that has given itself to idolatry.
Right.
And then he said, "No, we cannot do this." And there was a certain scholar I would read who said he didn't come and instituted an economic revolution or cultural revolution. He started at the very heart of market society, which is a polytheistic society.
Right.
Whether you agree with his thesis or not, what he was able to bring was to break something that was orthodox, normal thinking. That's why they were confused. They're like, "Yo, Tamit,
what is this?"
Like this is the way we do things.
Why do you want to come on?
Yeah, you want to upset everything.
Right.
So the free thinker appears at every time in history.
Right.
And
they did give examples like, why should we follow you when we have our forefathers believe?
Exactly. So but also there is a thing here Because I hear this term, and in Gambia when people say "keep free thinker," what they're essentially trying to say is that this person is an atheist or question religion. There is a truth to it, but it's not the whole truth.
Right.
Because within religion itself, free thinkers exist. People who went against the bounds of orthodoxy and to institute a new conversation, a new reality that was not the norm. Like for example, you see the Sufis within Islam having clashes with mainstream understanding and interpretation of the Quran. Right. You see the mystics in Christianity, the Desert Fathers, and a lot of these Muslim Meister Eckhart appearing in Germany in the 14th century or so. Going against what he understood. Right. Even here in the sub-region, we see the Baifal, the Taliban Bais, in the Yala people, going against what people would consider to be the normal interpretation. Yeah. So yeah, basically.
Okay.
I mean, for me, like just piggybacking off of what you just said, like I am deeply impressed by people who, the biphiles, right, who would live a completely different lifestyle from what everybody normalizes and are proud of it and are happy to. And when you look at them from a distance, you can see there's an extent of liberty for you to just freely do what you want to do. Right. And for me, that's what free thinking comes from. I feel like it's like the liberty to be logically free, to do things outside of the norm. It doesn't have to derive from one religion or one culture. Right. It's in every situation that you find yourself, to be able to make unbiased, uncoerced, to form ideas freely, ideologies, based off of the realistic situations that you find yourself in. That's what I feel like free thinking is, like forming it as it goes and not just sticking to, this is exactly how it's done since the 2000s, and we have to stick to this.
We are going to come to, we are going to get to where the limits of, should free thinking have limits, right? We don't want to jump the ship on this one because we want to build up. Yeah, but that's a good point. So, so how can individuals cultivate free thinking, right? And avoid falling into group thinking and conformity within, say, Gambia? How can we Gambians, because I would say I'm also a victim, not a victim, but this is home. There's certain things that have been engraved in me since Tami Hale.
That's right.
And from what you just mentioned, I realize it's important to know history, to know your history, to know some of these people. Why were they termed as free thinking? So how can we cultivate free thinking here?
I think it's always important to also understand context,
right?
And the context that we exist in, and what would be free thinking could be very relative and relational to where you exist.
Right.
Yeah. Like for example, in Gambia, there's a lot of long-held beliefs that sometimes you think about. You're like, this is not really working, but it creates some sense of, it cushions people. And you have to think of an alternative that you can give people to hold on to, because if you take that from them,
then what?
Then what? And there's a lot of difficult conversations that we haven't had in this country precisely because, and there's a lot of conversations that there is no meeting ground.
Right.
Let me give you an example.
Dialogue.
Yeah? When we talk about FGM,
right?
FGM is a harmful practice. It's very clear medically, yeah? But when you come to our people and you tell them that FGM, we should stop doing FGM, what they hear, it's not that it's harmful. What they hear, it's
an attack on their beliefs. That's what they see it as.
It's this colonial anxiety, this colonial memory, this colonial paranoia that we have, that the white man has come once again to destroy the little culture that we have left. Yeah.
Right.
So in a context like that, where those colonially induced thinking passes for free thinking, and where those genuine free thinking and free thought meet that, because there's a lot of things that we call free thinking, but it's actually just something that is deeply Eurocentric, deeply white-based, and then it passes for what we will call civilization.
Right.
So to cultivate free thinking begins with a cultivation of the intellect, which we can get into later, and but primarily to question the very assumptions of society. And questioning the very assumptions of society means questioning your assumptions,
Right.
your beliefs. Yeah, where do they really come from? Like you're saying, understanding history is very key because people would people because even the atheism that will rise out of the West, yeah, it came as a consequence of that same thing I was talking about, the
Right.
chokehold of the church on reason. And when they were able to free themselves from that, they were able to create
Right.
these scientific methodologies. But look at where that also led the world. We are at the brink of a climate crisis. Yeah, we're at the brink
brink?
of really a planetary crisis because there was also unfettered bounds. Because the human being can go to a certain extent, but I feel like
There's a limit.
there
There should be
there's-
a wall. or
yeah,
something.
because not even a limit, but a sort of a responsibility as to what you where you can go and where you can stop. Not because you are limiting yourself because you fear consequences of what people might say or think, but because you have an ethical responsibility
Right.
and a moral responsibility
Right.
before the earth, before the creatures, and before everything that exists.
That's right.
Right.
Fear of offending or fear of being offensive. I think that has a lot to do with the reason why people just don't. Because what I have here, you just said fear, and it came to my head. The reason why people would not just comfortably just deviate from the norm is fear. And you know what the reason why this show is important, and the reason why this particular topic is extremely important, is because that's what we need to let people know, that the fear of being offensive, the fear of offending has held a lot of people back. And as a reason, we need to realize that as human beings, change is a big part of who we are. So why do you think that someone thinking just a little bit outside of what the norm is an issue? Like if we normalize that, if we realize like we should stop being afraid of offending, and I think that has really limited our progress as far as thinking outside of the box. Because there's a lot of times I have experienced this. There's certain things that I would see, and I'm piggybacking off of what you said, I would think this doesn't seem right, but I'm thinking if I say something, which I think if I do say, like just thinking out of the box, if I do say could form a change, start a change, ripple something. But I'm always like, I might be offending someone. If they're okay with it, I should just stay back. But we need to have these conversations. And then that fear, if we let it go, we will be thinking a lot outside of the box. And free thinking would be a lot more accepted.
Right.
Because that's what we need.
So, in a sentence, what would you say? How can we cultivate free thinking?
By eliminating fear of offending.
Offending.
Eliminating fear of being offensive,
Right.
and understanding that free thinking is a part of adaptability, and changing is a part of being human. So why are we holding back on those things?
Yeah.
Why are we thinking, okay, these are the norms for so long, if we deviate from that, something is going to go wrong? Just test it out. You never know what's on the other side. And for me, that's what excites me about, the realization and the ability to be able to think outside. Because it would offer you opportunities you don't even know, and you are holding yourself back.
Right.
So eliminate that fear of offending or being offensive, because sometimes change has to be some sort of offensive for people if it doesn't offend you, if it doesn't ruffle you a little bit, you wouldn't think about it.
You have to make it uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Thought-provoking conversations are uncomfortable.
They are.
We need to be able to be uncomfortable, right? So what would you, in a sentence?
I think what
Might be a little bit hard to compress in a sentence, but
yeah,
for the viewers.
Yeah, one of the things I do know is dedicating yourself to the pursuit of knowledge. Because
Please repeat that
yes.
again. Just look at that camera and just repeat that again.
A dedication to the pursuit of knowledge.
Thank you very much.
He said it with a squint. He means it.
Look,
yeah.
I don't want to cut you off. I've always emphasized having general knowledge. You can specialize. There's no harm in that. But have knowledge of things. Have knowledge of history. You don't need to be a historian. It's important to have knowledge of history.
Yep.
It's important to be able to fix your chair.
Yep.
A little bit of skill. It's knowledge. Because the example I can give is when God said he taught Adam everything. What does he mean by that? I don't think it's limited to just naming plants and animals and this,
No.
right? It's he gave him the ability to be able to accumulate knowledge and utilize it. And it breaks so many chains that you have in your head. It makes you be able to see things more clearly, be able to not be offended or be offensive, right? Because if, for example, I'm outside and need more Hajj, right? Yeah, it's an insult in our society, but am I a dog?
No. It doesn't
I
make
can
you
just laugh it off and
no.
be like, yeah, man. You're okay, the person there.
Yeah.
So knowledge is important. Knowledge is freedom for the soul. It's freedom for your mental well-being. It's freedom. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and also the thing is, one of the things that, like you're saying, people need to have, like at least have some general understanding of reality, is because, and you see, the consequences of Western free thought led us to this compartmentalization of knowledge.
Right.
Yeah, like for example, I keep telling people, how is it that you're a political scientist and you're not a historian? How can you be a
Make it make
historian but you're
sense.
not an economist? Because you cannot understand a society's economy without understanding its history, and you cannot understand its history without understanding its political structure and superstructure.
Right.
So, but there's something I wanted to say is there is such a thing as a rational understanding, rational free thought, and I'm just going off of something here. I'm just conceptualizing, and another thing is you have rational free thought and instinctual free thought. Instinctually, we understand certain things to be wrong. That's why I cannot put my finger on it. Why, Limom? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that is where we begin. Every time human society starts changing,
Default setting.
it's because there is something in the human being called the mind, in everyday language, that shows you something is fundamental. Like you meet someone, it's like, I don't think this voting system is working. I don't know that.
Right.
Yeah, that is an instinctual understanding that is not working. A rational understanding is now having the time and the place to dedicate yourself to really understanding what are the forces that creating this voting system and why is it not working. Understanding those forces, now you're leaving the bounds of instinct to reason. Because now you have an informed understanding, a scientific, rational understanding of it, and that's where you leave the realm of speculation. Because a lot of things that pass for free thought are what they are, just thoughts, but most of them are just speculation.
Right.
And speculation is where we begin. It's like when you're growing up, you have these questions, you don't know how to answer them,
and you seek.
Yeah. And then as you grow older, you get more understanding. You begin to find answers for them. So we must now, how do we move from a suspicion of something is wrong or something is right to going to a level where we have a rational understanding.
We know.
And informed, educated understanding.
Right.
Because free thought is not free thought if it is not informed by a knowledge that is foregrounded in reality.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one because there are prerequisites to having a free thinking society. Knowledge, knowing the root things of going back to the roots, right? So knowing your history, knowing why your society functions the way it functions. You can. It's even easier for you to be able to predict the direction for example, your country is moving, right? If you know its history. Then again, we still want a one-sentence answer to how can individuals cultivate free thought in Gambia? What should individuals do? We've mentioned knowledge. What else?
What else would be to venture into the unknown, to understand that tradition is tradition. Tradition comes from the Latin word tradere, which means transmission. It is received understandings and received ideas and received authorities.
Right.
Yeah, and when you start questioning them, not out of disrespect or out of contempt, because sometimes what passes for free thought is contempt at your own way of life or your people, because you feel like my people are so ignorant, because you're so enamored by Western reality or Arab reality or something. So you, instead of becoming a free thinker in that you question every received authority, whether it's colonially induced or religiously induced, you just run into one and leave the other behind.
Right.
Yeah. So you start seeing the rise of a people who they tell you, oh, but Gambia is so backward, we could have this, we could have this. And when you look at the root, at the principal core of what they're talking about, it reduces itself to this inferiority complex.
Right.
So where do we distinguish between an inferiority complex and a genuine attempt at questioning and unraveling things?
Right.
So
can you say that is also deeply rooted in our culture?
It is. I mean, we are here speaking English, and language carries with it a whole baggage and history. So
Right.
There's something that you said that I wanted to come back to,
Right.
and it has something to say. You say God gave Adam everything.
He taught him everything.
He taught him
Got
everything.
him all the names.
All the names.
And one of the things that God gave Adam was free will.
Right. I mean, that's what we human beings have. We have the ability to choose what we want.
And now that brings me to him. Imagine, think of it from this point of view. As a person, right? Would it make sense for you to just fall out of the sky and just start learning things on your own?
No.
It makes sense that you're born in a family.
Right.
It makes sense that you grow up and you develop. It makes sense that their moral ways and things guide you into the world. It makes sense. But it makes sense that at a certain time in your life that you are allowed, or it should be okay at a certain time in everyone's life to think freely.
Right.
To be a free thinker, because that's when you are starting to form your own self.
I mean, if we can give an example of what I think, I believe the epitome of free thinking is to look at babies. Babies have it's like they just want to learn. They're just so open-minded, right? If you look at babies from the age of 2, 3 to like 4, 5, it's like they just want to know everything.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
2 down, they're just looking.
Yep.
They have no political affiliation. It's a concept of fitra. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like we come with a default setting where we are open-minded to learning.
To
things.
learn. We're here to
like absorb.
sponges,
Exactly.
just take in.
Right.
Just take in.
It seems like societal norms that we grew up in at some point also has an effect, has an impact on how we formulate our thoughts.
Yeah.
And this leads to the next question, whether societal norms are actually hindering our progress of free thinking and developing as a nation in general. So what can we do, if you know of any that you can mention, societal norms that are hindering free thinking? Tribalism, for example. I think tribalism is a dumb concept, right? In today's age.
Absolutely.
Why are we still a tribalistic society? Because we are. If we deny that, then there's something wrong.
Yeah, he just mentioned FGM.
Right. Right.
I think, there are things that hinder. I really, I used to like this term free thinking, but at some point I realized
If we have an alternative word to use, I'm open for it. Right?
Yeah. So I will come up with something. The cultivation of the intellect, the cultivation of the refinement of the mind. There are things, of course, in this society, like every society in the world, that hinder the progress of cultivating the human mind.
Right.
Yeah. In Gambia, I'll give you my favorite one. Going to school, going through the motions. You get me?
And the
You see
devotions.
where I'm going with this? Yes. If you don't go to school, yeah, how do you view a person kumusuta dem school life? What are some of the things that have been pushed into your mind? Why is it that we say we need an educated president? Why do we say that a person who is educated is different from the person who is not educated? But what
do we
education?
mean by that?
What is this education that we are
Right.
having? This schooling system that we have was created by the colonial system to groom people who can help them run the country and they extract their profit. They needed translators because they cannot talk to the local population.
Right.
They needed clerks. They needed secretaries.
Drivers.
They needed people who can serve them.
Right.
So this educational system was not created to create a humane, conscious human being.
Right.
It was created for the advancement of the colonial mode of production.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Too.
So when we come back and then we continue, instead of dismantling this colonially created school system, we continued it, and somebody will tell you, your mom saw them school, you'll just end up like your father who is just a farmer.
Right.
As if you don't have farmers, you will be sitting there saying those things. Yeah. Or sometimes you'll hear this, a farmer and a teacher, who is more important? So we grew up in a society that created these zombies, and
I don't mean to cut you. I'm so sorry. But this is precisely why. You see where I was going with what I said? That at some point in your life, because you pass through, you were taught by your home, right. You are taught by your school. At what point do you think for yourself? That's why I say, in every person's life, you should have that period at least, or time in your life where you are allowed to just think and create self-actualization. That's how you build your future. Right. Because then that's how you view your current situation, because everybody's situation is different. Right. Now you being able to freely cultivate the thought and think, this is my situation, this is how it differs from this person, this is what's logical, this is what ideas would work for me, this is what wouldn't. Everyone needs that. Right. But the problem we have in Gambia is we don't have a culture that allows you to do that, because there's situations where the thought is expected to be done for you at every step of the way. And if you watch how most things go, how most people's life, it's pretty scripted.
Right.
And
I mean, do we even, then again, we grow up to be parents, right? That's how our parents grew up. They grew up in a system. It's like, do they even know they're writing these scripts? Is it something they just, okay, it's feeling kofeka?
Then go continue. I'm so sorry to cut you, but I have these conversations every time we go up country. Yeah, I say, but is it serving you?
What does it mean?
This is our culture. This is what we know.
Yeah.
Like when we're talking about sensitive topics like FGM, child marriages and stuff. This is our culture. This is what we know. I say, okay. Now, if you don't think freely, you would not allow yourself to sit back and think, why did people practice FGM? Now that takes us to the source, like the history. What was the reason? Is this a reason do we need to still be reasoning this way? Is it still rational, like you mentioned? Right. Is this something that serves us? Right. If it doesn't, logical, being able to freely form these ideas and ideologies, that's what free thinking is to me. Now you are able to be like, okay, leader had to put on. This, it was used to do something great in the past. Right. It was a form of protection. Parents didn't cut their kids because they hated them back then. They thought they were protecting them. But if there's a different form and there's new knowledge to show you that it doesn't work anymore, just cut it out. So this is why free thinking is absolutely we have to cultivate these cultures and just forget.
And you mentioned something that is important. Is there's the one of the hindrances you were asking about hindrances is the issue of authority and hierarchy. Yeah. So you go from your house, you have your parents who have their idea of how you should live your life. You go to school. So at every time of your life, you have an authority figure, the parents at the house, the teachers at the school, the boss at the job. Yeah. And then, of course, you have the thinkers of society. You have the TV. So, for example, in Marxism, they talk about the base and the superstructure. Yeah, the base is basically the point of production and the economic base. Yeah, and then you have the superstructure, which is where the ideas of the ruling class are enacted. Yeah, through the media, through religion, through law. So that's why you'll see somebody that's been voting since 1965. It doesn't work, but he would die to cast that ballot, ballot, right? Because that person has been convinced. These are the ideas, what the Marxism they call the dominant ideas of the ruling class. This indoctrination that happened from when you're young. You need to go to school. It's the key to success. And then you went to school, you finished, you are still here. You're like, success, be mama, what type of success? Why you I'm good belly?
Education is the key, though.
Yeah, I don't really
It's
believe
the
that.
interpretation of education that's the problem.
I think knowledge, but the term education itself had so much baggage. But I think we'll get into that. But
maybe
limited.
Maybe what we should do is to try and unravel the term education.
Yep.
What does it mean, and what is it seen to mean now? Because I think it's a compound word. It do entail a lot of things.
The term education, if I remember correctly, comes from the etymology is a Latin root is to train, to cultivate.
Right.
To come to train, like the Arabic word tarbiyah. Yeah, it has the same root as the word rab and murabbi. It's like it's the train. So the purpose of education in the ancient world was to refine the human spirit and move it away from what they will call the bestial nature of man, the bestial nature of the human being, to take it towards the angelic nature of the
nature,
the Shaitani and the Malakani,
Right.
so this was the idea. The idea was that the human being have this desire, this ego that has a gravitational pull towards that, which is the basis of things,
Right.
And now, how can this human being be cultivated to be trained to understand that they can rise above these egoistic desires and to become a fully actualized human being, who can become a rational, ethical, moral, intelligent creature in society and in tune with nature. Now, what we have as passive as education, it's basically a grooming ground for slaves who can support the capitalist mode of production.
So formal education.
Formal education, because even when you look at the educational system, when you have a textbook in an educational system, what do they write there? Best book for the exam. If you read this book, you will pass your exam. Yeah. At every point, you've been examined whether you have mastered this part of your indoctrination. Now you can proceed. And then, because it's not even to create you to become a thinker,
Right.
It is for you to memorize stuff and regurgitate it, because that's how you can be a good slave. A slave
So
cannot
conform.
think.
Yeah.
A slave is not supposed to think,
Yeah.
because the moment the slave starts thinking, it breaks the bounds and the bonds of enslavement. You see, even when you look at human history, you look at the Haitian Revolution in Haiti, when the enslaved Africans, they rose up on the 22nd of August, 1789, and they burned down the plantation, all the plantations in San Domingo. You know why? Because they know that this
Yep.
and this is what links us to the slave system. The moment they figured out this is not witchcraft, these people don't have witchcraft power over it. Because why? White people showed up, niggas was like, who are these people? They came with cannons and shit. Niggas is like, ni mom, ni jinelan. You even have that concept in Gambia, tubab jinela. Because people didn't have, they didn't understand what is violent people were just, so
They're not used to, that's not normal.
It's not
That wasn't
normal.
normal.
Yeah, you know how black people used to fight. Actually, when you look at African history, I'll still get back to the point. Yeah,
Right.
when you look at African history, Africans fought with the concept of the least casualties.
Agreed. I've seen that somewhere.
Yes. So black people used to fight. They didn't need to have breaks, and they will have a place where they will fight.
Right, that's a battleground.
Battleground.
Yeah.
And then maybe two sunaj bitange. Hey, let's stop.
We need to take a break.
Let's go have a siesta.
I
we'll
like
be back.
that idea
You get? So, but when the enslaver and the colonizer came, they came with guns and bullets and bayonets.
They were
And just
ready.
Africans were like, "Listen, what do you want? This land?
Take it.
We don't need this."
I don't want problem.
So the enslaved Africans there, what they recognized was this is a material problem. The moment they went from that instinctual yearning for freedom to a rational desire for freedom, they burned down the only thing that linked them to these people. They burned down all the plantation because that is the source of their misery and is the source of the profit for the master.
Right.
They severed the tie. That is the most profound education a human being can receive when they understand what it is that will be freedom and they take steps to achieve it. Yeah. But look at our society. Yeah. When one of the most ridiculous things that goes on in our society, in this neo-colonial society, is this idea of civic education.
Right.
You have the right to health. You have the right to education. You have the right to life. You have right to education. You can't afford the education. You have the right to health. You go to Kanifing Hospital. There's no drugs. What is the use of having rights if you can't actualize them? But people believe this stuff. They believe in the Constitution. When you see these things I'm saying, somebody will listen. Kimam, is a problem. Because the thing is, the ideas of the ruling class have to be protected at all costs, and they're not magical, they're not metaphysical, they don't drop from the sky. They're needed for the maintenance of order in society so that the elite, the few who enjoy and benefit from these things can stay at the top. And the moment people recognize the BS, the nonsense, yeah, they break free. You see, Yahya Jammeh was here for 22 years. At some point, there was a qualitative leap. People are like, oh shit, this guy is just a human being. I mean, and I think it happened at a certain point. And then when people recognized it, there was no going back. Yeah. So that's the thing. For me, I think when we want to begin this idea of having critical thinking in this society, we must dismantle the entire educational system of this country. Whether it's the madrasas, whether it's the English system, learn our languages, man.
Like, listen, I
begin their language, and we get
education is still the key to success. However, the problem we have is the interpretation of education. Like everything you said, to a certain degree, I agree. But like you said, you started with the definition of education. If it's to train and cultivate, why must it always be in that cube that you have built for us to go and be indoctrinated? Why must education be limited to that? For my concern is that it's a general belief that that's where education is confined to. And that is very worrying for me because there is, from the moment you wake up, you are learning. It's just that you have to open your mind to this, to the reality that you can do it. And that's what you need to do. Learning doesn't stop. So why does it mean that education is the key to success? But education doesn't only happen in the classrooms. No. You go outside. This conversation is big education for me. And when I say education, that's the perspective I'm saying. Education is getting into the car and realizing, oh, okay, not every driver has the same temperament. So when I step outside, I can be rough with this other driver, but this one might be rough back at me. So you have learned from that situation. Every little detail that you're picking up that you haven't realized a second ago is education, and it never stops. So this idea that we have cultivated over time that it must only happen within a confined cube or that it should only come from that textbook, that in itself is the problem. And civic education, I feel like, is the language that people like us use to be able to afford other people who haven't had this realization to come on board and realize, hey, you don't have to always think this way. This is what your right is. You're supposed to be able to do this. And like you said something, it doesn't exist, but if people don't have the realization of its existence, when will they start using it and when will people really be free? So that's what civic education is to me. I feel like it's a language that's accepted. It's accepted language because you guys have to understand some of these concepts you want to push them. You go to government level, it's shut down because the language is not socially or culturally accepted. I have experienced this firsthand, trying to have a conversation about comprehensive sexuality education. I have had that experience. Oh, no. I don't know if we should put sexual in there because, it's society, da. It's just a word. Like we hide behind these things because we fear what are we teaching these children if we engage them in CSE? But CSE is teaching them about life. It's teaching them about self-actualization. It's teaching them about social cues, things that you would need in your free thinking phase to be able to like develop your life and your future.
Right.
So if we decide to just cut it out, it's going to be a huge problem.
I was going to make a comment on that.
Yeah. I feel like it's the definition of that's been problem.
It's a word problem.
Yeah.
Right. It's a word problem, and I do agree with you.
Yeah. Me too.
There's a problem with our education system, and it do need to be reformed. And I think there are steps that should be taken into achieving that goal. Someone might be hearing you and feel like, oh, we should go out and burn all the universities, right? We don't want that. So I just want to set that record straight.
I mean, what I mean is...
I understand what you mean.
Yeah, let me just add something, is that language is a site of struggle.
Thank you.
Language is a weapon.
Yes.
And you see, when I sit down here to speak in English, yeah, I have already confined.
Well,
No, I'm just giving an example. I'm very comfortable speaking the colonizer's language. But what I'm talking about here is what Mariama. I just want to disagree with Mariama a little bit. Words do matter. Words are very important. Yeah. The way we even talk about, let's say, civic education. Yeah. The word civic shares the same root as citizen.
Yes.
Shares the same roots as civilization.
Right.
Yeah, as civil. And those words carry with them so much violence in history.
Right.
We are going to Christianize and civilize the Africans. We are going to create them into citizens.
I mean, if you put it from
The
that
nation,
perspective.
yeah. So, no, and then when you go back and then you realize how they interconnected, because the nation state, the modern nation state that we're using, appears at a certain time in history. In France, France created the first nation state by disposing of the monarchy. Yeah. And when they disposed, they created this, and the term citizen used to be a revolutionary word at that time. So you will see somebody who participated in the French Revolution, they used to call you, like in Capital Volume 1 of Karl Marx, you see he writes a letter to Citizen Maurice. So I'll call myself Citizen Alieu.
Like a patriot.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
At that time, because it was such a revolutionary concept.
Right.
But the nation state also appeared as the power, the concentration of power of the bourgeoisie, the rising bourgeoisie that created capitalism. Yeah. So when you say civic education, you are educating people on the norms and the realities and the proclivities and the sort of the importance of the nation state.
Right.
But this colonially created nation state, which is a mimicry of the European nation state, and now it is a neo-colonial, neoliberal state. I owe no loyalties to the neo-colonial state. I owe all my loyalty to my people.
Right.
But the neo-colonial state, until it is replaced with an African state, it can still be nation state. You can have your leadership and whatnot, but it must now become as people cannot live at the expense of the state. The state have to live at the expense of the people. The state have to be subjugated to the people, and not the other way around, which is what the neo-colonial state is. We are subjugated to the state, and we do the biddings of the state. So I'm saying all of this to say,
And the state do the bidding
of the international ruling class, the international capitalist system. And so when I say civic education, I have written an essay called Civic Education is a Sham. Yeah? Because what we are talking about is why don't we create a popular education, a political education? Before I can tell you, you have the right to health.
Right.
After telling you that, what do I tell you? The reason, now the person have to know, why is it that I have this right, but I can't actualize it? You have to unveil the wall of oppression. People need to see, because once you see the oppression, you cannot unsee it. There is a system in place that was not introduced by God. It was created by the greed of human beings, that somebody can have so much, the other person have nothing, and that if your health system is not good, that was not created by the people. It was not God who created it. It was created by a system that had usurped the resources of the society, and there are few people. Adam Barrow is eating from that. in his there's corrupt people in this government of the Gambia are eating from it. The little elite, the small little petit bourgeois class of Gambia are also benefiting from that. And the majority, the 80% of Gambians are groaning under that. You wanted to have free thought.
Right.
Yeah? Let's have it then.
So
I'm not complaining.
can I
I'm not
speak?
complaining.
Sour.
So this is my thing. It's the intention that matters. So the government, like you say, is running the international whatever's agenda. Now, the people who are running that agenda on the ground here as Gambians, how are revolutions done? They are massed behind something until they can sprout out and actually take over. Do you know what I mean? So if using the word civic education is what is understood, don't you think just the simple realization that you have a right to health for someone who lives in the most remote part of the country, who has no access to these things, don't you think that in itself is like a spark of something? Okay, so if I have a right to help, how come this is not here? It makes you question things, and that has good rippling effects, because the more you question, the more you're just getting more and more uncomfortable with what has been dished out to you. I'm a citizen of this country. I am citizen Mariama, yes. But if I'm citizen Mariama and I'm supposed to have the right to health, how come only 5% of the country is enjoying that and I'm not? Then the conversation expands, because it becomes not just me. I'll go and sit with Musa and say, boy, conversations spark from discomfort. But my thing is, if you use the intention of the oppressor against them, it works for you. You understand that their intention is to use this word to continue making us look little. Okay, that's fine. We'll use it to make you comfortable so we can have access to what we want. And that's my idea of civil education, because I've worked with CSOs and I've gone up country to do these talks. And my intention, I've always even said it to institutions I've worked with, I say, first we need to realize that if our Gambianness goes beyond the greed that we see and the money we see, there's a lot of change to be done. Mm-hmm. One is true. The government is doing what they need to do. If they want the funds and stuff, they're going to have to comply to certain things. Right. If you are an NGO in Gambia, if you want the funds and stuff to make a change, you have to comply to certain things. It doesn't make it right. And it's not right. And you most likely shouldn't, because you should be like blowing whistles on those things. But my point is, if you don't say, okay, I'm going to do civic education, you are giving me funds to go and do civic education, sure. But when you go to the community that needs that information, how do you deliver it from your heart to make sure that they use it to foster the change that would ripple, and then things would be better? It would stop being the 5%. It can eventually start being the 10, the 15, the 25, because awareness, that's how it grows. But Mandal, I'm a big believer of, okay, this is what you've given me. All right. How do I make it work for me? All right. So this is my angle of civic education. And when I say education, I feel like it can happen anywhere. So
I kind of get the sentiment, yeah?
And I'm encouraging education from that point of view. Like, don't look at it as, okay, it's the idea of the West, so I'm not going to use it.
So this is the thing. So that's a branch of what we are trying to talk about, education and free thinking. That's a branch. It could be, however you see it, right? When you say Duga, and we'll keep going deep and deep and deep and deep and deep, and it becomes an endless hole.
Yeah.
But let's come back a little bit with the education, where how can we foster individual free thought without group thinking? How can we help individuals? Even if group thinking is not a bad thing, right? As long as your agendas align, but don't go into group thinking. Don't be a sheep, basically, right? If you are mentally joining a group thinking, understand what they stand for, like what is it that make them think this way and have these agendas. Like, understand it. Like, that's free thinking, in my opinion. What I can't munuma talk with mane julit la and understand basic Islam, right? That's just I'm just following. I have no idea what I'm following. I crash anytime. Muna dem and something muyengal marek. I'm not grounded, like you mentioned. You need to be grounded on a basis, right? So how can we talk to the audience, like the individuals, the average Gambian. That's a favorite term for a lot of people. I don't know what it means, but
Average Gambian?
Average Gambian, right? What
Yeah,
does average
average
Gambian
Gambian.
mean? But I think we both understand what it means. We don't have to define it.
Right.
How can we have the average Gambian foster individual free thought? Like what you've mentioned, knowledge. You've also mentioned. I think that's where education came into play. We stretched it a little bit. It's a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, we don't want to sound like we're starting a revolution, right?
No.
A violent revolution.
No.
I mean,
that's not the intention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
So
you
that's
know,
what that comes back to the whole intention of things.
we just need to clear things for the viewer, right?
Don't come
so
for us.
we don't want someone to listen to your segment, a portion of your segment, and be like, okay, Alieu, he's my hero. Let's go burn down the education system. We don't want that.
No.
We want to be able to intellectually talk. It's like playing chess. It's violent, but it's not really violent. The day Ubisa hell.
It's intense.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what we want, and we need to navigate that very, very carefully, because we know Gambians. I am one. We are very reactive people. We
So-
deglu dara,
To disclaim,
right?
this is not to incite
Any
anything.
violence.
It's what the episode is called. We're supposed to be thinking outside of the
Right,
box.
right.
So, like I said, the intention is there.
Right.
Don't misconstrue it.
Exactly.
And then use it for,
You can see Alieu and
Alieu wants
Mariama
peace.
disagreeing.
Oh,
which
we
is
do this all the
fine.
time.
It's perfectly fine. We should normalize being able to have a dialogue and disagree, and still not hold anything personal.
Yeah, that's my dog.
Right?
He knows.
I think, like civilization, you can't have a civilization if you don't have decorum,
Right.
right? It's key. It's important for a civil society to be civil. Then again, you can define that however you like, or however anyone likes.
Alieu.
But we are in a civil society. Nekatun si Stone Age, si Nekatun, 50, 100 years ago, fini, things were different. Times have changed, and times have changed, but the mindset of people have not really caught up to the changing times. So what we want to do is we want to help people. I myself, I'm a host because I want to learn. How madara? I'm open to learning. These are not my opinions. I'm just trying to ask questions on behalf of myself and on the behalf of people that are, these questions, they have them in their minds and they don't have a platform. So what we want to do is we want to have individual free thought that benefits society as a whole, right? So you can give us our background. I think you mentioned education, which is important. What is your educational background?
You really
It's interesting. Remind me again.
Me again.
And the audience, of course.
I've said this. I've like.
I know.
You feel like it's a story you've been through over and over.
Over. So
what is your highest level of formal education? Let's start there.
Grade 8.
Grade 8. Okay.
So I never went to high school. I never went to university. I think when I was 14, I realized this is not it. It's not gonna cut it. I'm gonna do something here and see how far I can go with it.
Right.
And so I dropped out voluntarily, and I started the process of re-educating myself, unlearning and rediscovering my humanity in the things that I'm learning, and also understanding knowledge as the product of social experience. And so, it's not an extraordinary story. And I'm not telling anyone to go quit school and start reading books. I'm also trying to do my disclaimers now. But I think, that is it. Because I think at some point I started like really thinking. I was 14, of course, I didn't know a lot. And I was just venturing out into the dunya, into the world. And so I started like really spending a lot of time at the library, really like reading, just eating it all up. And then I also joined some organizations that were Pan-Africanist in nature and started having that Pan-Africanist revolutionary political education, which I proudly and still adhere to. That's it. But I think one of the ways that we can really, really like cultivate individuals who can think freely and deeply, because it's not just to think freely,
No.
but it's to think
To
deeply.
reflect.
Yes, it's to also be contemplative and to be introspective.
Right.
So yeah, let me just also say something. Sometimes when I get into these things, I can get very passionate. Yeah,
It's okay.
but basically, we also must be a contemplative people, and we must also learn how to realize that sentimentalism is not knowledge.
Mm.
No.
Somebody can come here and do a fiery speech,
Right.
but it's just that it's just sentimentalism and populism.
Charm.
Yeah, exactly. Charisma, and it's the crisis of charisma that we see all around the world.
So
But
they have the tools to express knowledge, but they don't really have the knowledge. They just know the wordplay and the.
Right.
basically, yeah.
Right.
But who are we to say who has knowledge or not?
I mean, right.
Um,
Right.
and I just want to finish this. Earlier I was talking about the ideas, the dominant ideas of the ruling class, and you don't have to think of the ruling class as just the government,
Right.
but people who control the means of production.
Right.
Would always make sure that we are in the society. So most of the things that pass up for mainstream thinking, actually conditionings that are important for society. I was just saying this earlier. Society to have certain semblance of order, but at every point in history, these things start crumbling.
Right.
You see, colonialism at some point. You wanted an example of a Gambian freethinker. Yeah, you look at somebody like Edward Francis Small. At some point, he realized, why is it that these people, who are human beings like us, should rule over us and decide our destiny for us? He questioned it, and he started a whole movement.
Right.
And that's why they call him the father of Gambian independence. I'm sure he came to his people, he told them, they're like, hey, Edward, your mom. Because I remember when Amilcar Cabral came back to Guinea-Bissau, and he had gone to study. It's a very interesting story. Amilcar Cabral was from Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. His parents were from Cape Verde, but he was born in Bafata in Bissau. And when he went to study in Portugal, when he went to study agronomy, he was part of only 14 people who have gone to university in the whole of Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau. He came back home and did this agronomy study of Guinea-Bissau. He spent 2 years doing the research. And then he deeply knew his people, and he deeply reacquainted himself with the landscape and everything. And then at some point, he went to Angola.
So before I cut you off, is it safe to say he acquired these tools through a formal education?
No, because Amilcar Cabral, alongside people like Agostinho Neto from Mozambique, I forgot some of these people now, Samora Machel, they were part of a people in Portugal who started saying we need to re-Africanize the African. Because the Portuguese colonies went through something called assimilado. It's like as the assimilationist policy of the French. But the Portuguese one was so ruthless. Like, if you want to be assimilated as a white person or something like that, you have to not speak your language. You don't have to speak, you have to change your name to Portuguese. It was really, so they created these clubs in the university in Lisbon. They will meet at the beach and they will start relearning their languages like Balanta and all of these things. And then they will start studying Marxism and start studying revolution and the struggles of anti-colonial struggles that are happening around the world. So he came back home with a mission, a specific mission, to destroy Portuguese colonialism in Guinea-Bissau forever.
Right.
And he went to Angola to continue that agronomist work, and then he came back and he disappeared for like 2 years, and he reappeared in Guinea-Bissau in the late 60s, and he gathered some of his friends and said, we need to create a party, a political party that will agitate for independence. People were like, you're Mondanga Dof. Literally, people abandoned him because of that, because the Portuguese are ruthless,
Right.
But he did that. That's what Thomas Sankara calls an ounce of madness. You must have an ounce of madness. And at the root, at the apex top of free thinking, of critical thinking is to have an ounce of madness. Because those people who dare to think, who changed society, people who created things like this, when they started, I'm sure people were like, these people, they have you have some issues in his head.
Right.
It's like that. So you must not be afraid.
Right.
And you must cultivate knowledge, you must cultivate wisdom, you must cultivate understanding, and you must be willing to question everything. And when you set out on that path, initially, it can get very scary, because I remember when I started, I realized I was literally losing my religion, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I lost it, for a long while, Like, I literally saw me losing my religion.
We were unlearning it because
Yes,
it was acquired through.
I used to pray. I used to say, God,
Right.
please help me, make me believe in you, because this thing is not working anymore. You get? Because I started having like these serious philosophical reflections, and so you.
How did you get it back?
You stand on tentative ground. I think that's a story for another day.
No, it's interesting because look, I would be honest with you, yeah. One of the main reasons why we started the Free Thinker segment is to also introduce religious beliefs into the conversations we are going to have, and where does religion stand in free thinking? Because I know Quran, I know Islam a little bit. I can't really make comment on the Bible or Christianity, but I know a little bit as well. The likes of Imam Ghazali, I don't know if you
know
if
Imam
you know him.
Ghazali,
He was a radical. The ounce of madness that you're talking about, that's Imam Ghazali, right? And he's named as what? Is it like the Hujjatul Islam, right? A proof of Islam. So it would be interesting to, maybe we can keep that for another episode, how you came back.
But
right?
you mentioned, Mariama, let me just do this, then you can come in.
Right.
No,
You mentioned Imam al-Ghazali is a very important figure, actually, because when you look at the history of Imam al-Ghazali, his life story, he has a book called Muqid al-Dalal, The Deliverance from Error. And he says, I have studied every philosophical system, and I've looked into every sect in Islam, and I've dissected it, I've studied everything, and I was not afraid. And then, Imam al-Ghazali, there was a point where he literally went into what now they call melancholia. Like
He just stopped talking.
Talk.
He just completely shut.
Because he shut down.
Yeah.
Because he said he wanted certainty, yaqeen.
Yeah.
And he couldn't find it. He wanted to know God. And he was that time perhaps the most celebrated scholar, sitting over Nizamiya, which is like the equivalence of, let's say, the University of Oxford or Cambridge now. Yeah. And one day he couldn't. And he left and took a journey into knowledge, into spirituality, and he stayed in the Masjid al-Aqsa as a janitor. This is like the biggest scholar.
Right.
When he came back, he was illuminated. And he wrote the Ihya Ulumuddin, where he explains, now he brings a deeper perspective to Islam that is like, it's so amazing. But I don't want to go into
You don't even have to explain it. So I see where your turning point came about.
Those
right?
are some of the
Not necessarily. In mine is song.
One of.
Shout out to Banyas still.
Those are some of the things we need to remind society, because you would realize how we follow people like that,
right?
How we believe them, because they have taken their own path,
right?
And they have sought, they have found, they have come back with knowledge, and they are sharing. How come we don't emulate those things?
See?
How come we don't have a culture that emulates those?
Exactly.
We have a culture of fellowship,
right?
Because we have a fear of offending or being offensive.
Yeah, and we also have this scarcity mentality, where it's sharing is a problem, right? And free thinking, if we want to take a serious step towards free thinking, we need to start by sharing, right? We need to start by sharing knowledge, what we know, and be able to create an environment where we can share with each other, but not rip each other apart, right? There's a favorite incident in Imam Ghazali's life, which is one of my favorite historical piece, where he was riding to a city, I think, and thieves came and then Cotier and I don't know if you
I know
right
the story. Yeah.
and where he was like, take everything but not my books, right? Because all my knowledge is there. And the thief turned and asked him, why do you call it knowledge if I can just easily steal it from you? And that was a turning point in his life. He thought about it, it's like, damn.
You can have them all.
Right?
He these are notes he's been writing for 2 years diligently.
Right.
Now when that happened, he went and he memorized everything.
Everything.
There were there's that tradition. I don't know. I don't want this to thought into,
right.
but
But the reason why I'm saying this, because it's important. It's an important piece of information where these guys were like the way they are because they were obsessed with knowledge. Right?
Seekers.
They were seekers of knowledge. You mentioned it. You need to ground yourself on knowledge for free thinking to be able to.
I mean, let me
blossom.
give you perhaps one of the most beautiful things that have happened in human civilization. At the peak of the Muslim civilization, Muslims took the Greek metaphysics, Greek philosophy, translated it into Arabic and engaged it. Yeah. And then you see people like Avicenna, Ibn Sina appearing, Averroes, Ibn Rushd. These people used Greek philosophy to explain a rational explanation of the Islamic creed, the Islamic belief system. And at that time, that is not considered to be, oh, what are you doing? You are taking, these people are not Muslim. Why are you taking this knowledge?
Right.
And then you see, even in the Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas, who was one of the greatest theological minds of the Catholic Church, he quotes Imam al-Ghazali. He quotes Averroes. He called Imam al-Ghazali al-Ghazal. And Ibn Sina became Avicenna in the West. So you still, when you engage Greek scholastic legacies and philosophies in the West, post Avicenna and Averroes, you'll see they call them. And Averroes was a Maliki jurist. He sits in the High Court as a Qadi in Muslim Spain then,
Yeah.
And so these people, they engaged that, and there was this cross-religious exchanges. St. Thomas didn't think twice to borrow from Imam al-Ghazali.
No,
Imam al-Ghazali
not at
doesn't have
all.
think twice to take from St. Thomas. And why? Because they understood. It's like there's a hadith there that they say, the Prophet said the wisdom is the lost property of the believer. Takes it wherever he finds it.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the basis of that exchange. So, but also one of the things I want to say is free thinking is never being a norm. It has and I don't think, this is my suspicion, that in every society, in every generation, it will be a few who will break away from the orthodox thinking system,
Right.
and then they will inspire society generally to move in that direction. But there's always a few in every generation. So our task is to create a core. W.E.B. Du Bois. I don't know. W.E.B. Du Bois is sometimes called the father of Pan-Africanism. He was an African American. He had this thesis that to change the Black American condition, we must create an elite core of highly educated Black American who can now lead to free. I mean, of course, that thesis didn't stand the test of time. But and I'm not saying that's what we should do here. But that people who
Maybe we should.
I mean, ideal at that,
Ideal.
Yeah, but so I think there will always be in Gambia and every society in the world, there are people who will break away and they will start thinking anew.
Right.
But also, I think it's going to be too much pressure to want this entire society to start moving that route. I think we will be ungovernable.
It won't. That's it. That's the beautiful thing about sharing. People are still going to choose whatever they want.
Yeah.
But at least the information is out there. It might be an inspiration to someone who has been thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right? We don't expect everybody to be philosophers and just, crossing their ropes and holding their books. we don't want that. We still need the doctors. We still need all these people in society. But
Absolutely.
we also need people that cultivate that help cultivate knowledge within people. We need those people are important. I mean, we have them. I think we do have them. I believe Gambian has some of the most brilliant minds. Just we don't have a platform where we can share these things.
I mean, the social media. I've come across like
But
brilliant.
social media, you're
Social
gonna go
media-
there.
No,
and
I'm
get
giving an example.
grilled.
I'm saying
It's like fishing at the Atlantic Ocean, right? It's a little bit too vast. It's not
I mean,
right.
what I'm saying is we have not created this society have not created the sort of arena where you can have people can have shared spaces even physically where these things can happen. But there are beginnings, yeah.
And this is the
I
point of the
remember,
whole
for
due
example,
diligence.
I
Yeah.
remember. You remember Balafong? Shout out to Latir and the whole crew at Balafong. At the beginning, when they had the Facebook group, and you meet these Gambians, they're like, this type of people
Amazing
exist,
group of people.
And we created like a whole generation. Some people became lifelong friends there. Some people, with this exchange. So I'm saying that there will come a time where this society will be more open to having these sort of things.
Right.
And because now we have decentralized media, you can sit at home and you can, like something like this. Back in the day, it's like a lot of work, So, fang na lola, like, yeah, basically.
back in the day, if you walk out there and say something,
Yeah.
you might get in trouble.
It's wahala.
So now social
yeah.
media has allowed us to eliminate some of that fear because you can hide behind somewhere and just
That is true.
speak your mind and then spark change.
That is true, which we are grateful for.
Very grateful.
I guess to wrap this up, we would just touch a little bit on that, where the freedom, social media brings in freedom of expression, right? But I think there should be a responsibility to how much freedom there is that you can grab and share. Is there such thing as too much free thinking? Is there a radical free thinking? Like, what are some of the consequences of? Because there's radical everything. People that are a little bit too extreme, right? Is there such thing as too much free thinking or radical free thinking? I'm not calling too much free thinking as radical free thinking. They're different.
Disclaimer.
I think
Yeah.
it's there's always been a very tricky question.
Right.
I think, and it's a very deep question because thinkers, intellectuals, philosophers, theologians have attempted to answer this question.
Right.
This is a question
Maybe let's Gambia give it a shot. Maybe you can just
What I do know is that the
Take a
human
chance on
being
it.
stands between choice and responsibility.
right.
You make a choice and you are responsible for any of its consequences.
That's right.
And when this principle, we can have this principle, then we can know that everything I say here, I'll be responsible for it.
Yeah.
Whether it is here,
Or anywhere.
even in this world, or maybe in the next.
So responsibility goes hand in hand with free thinking.
Yeah, basically, there are things that when we put out there would be harmful.
Right.
Yeah. If I come here and I'm trying to justify killing people on the street, that is not free thinking anymore. I mean, you can think whatever you want, but that part, the responsibility,
Right.
because you are responsible to a certain extent. You are part of a social nexus,
Right.
and in that social nexus, there are certain things that are accepted as a given. Like, for example,
Yeah.
it's a given that nobody have to tell you don't have to slap your mother. Yeah, that is very clear, right? And there's also what you talk about, the issue of fitra.
Yeah.
There's also that default setting. So you see, I'm not trying to digress, but you see, even in the Islamic theological tradition, there was that debate between the Maturidi theological school and the Ash'ari, whether the human being is innately knows good and evil, or they know it through revelation. It's like we will talk about it
Right.
someday. But for me, I think, there are bounds that as we can think as much as we want, but our thinking must not be detrimental to the health of society should not be detrimental to the to life.
So
So-
you are in essence, you're free to think as far as you want, but how you put it out should be it should come with a sense of responsibility.
That is
It is what we call in civic education rights and responsibilities, right?
Right.
I guess.
So what is your
I'm
take
just
on
messing
that?
with you. Yeah.
I mean,
It is.
I see you agree with that. So do you have anything to add on top of that?
That's why I agree with him from the point of view that he said language is powerful.
is.
Words
Words
can
are
make one
powerful.
thing mean something or another.
I mean,
And
wars have been waged just
thank you.
with words.
And that's why logic is important. Rational thinking, like having the ability to think critically and say, does this work based on this situation? Does it make sense?
Right.
Education.
I mean, we do know we know the idea of being delusional, right? Where you think you've been logical, you've been rational, you are in check.
But then
in
that
reality,
that brings me to this little list I made here. He said something very important about unlearning.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of, just development in life. There's a certain point you gotta unlearn a lot of things. And once you do that, you go into seeking mode. That's why we are questioning everything. Everything is like, I wonder what that is. That doesn't sit quite right with me, but well, maybe I'll just go and Google and check what this is about. That's how thoughts are formed. Now you are sparking thought, you're thinking, this and this. To yourself, you might be thinking, am I delusional? And those are the reasons why people have the urge to go and sit with a friend and say, hey,
I mean, the fact that you even ask yourself, am I delusional?
thank you.
That is a key.
That's a big
key.
part of it.
That's a big part.
And that would push you to go and talk to Alieu and say, hey, what do you think about this? I've been thinking about this. And since the other day when I saw this, this has been in my mind. Now you and Alieu are thinking about it. Then it becomes a point of conversation. The conversation grows. And once we realize this in collective thinking, that is what that is what champions collective action. And collective action is what we're going to need to do to change a lot of things. And one of those things that we need to do collectively is to think open-mindedly, logically, and to think outside of the box. Let's not think based off of just this situation. Think of the source, like you said, what it is now and what it may look like based off of your actions today. So all of those things is what free thinking is to me. Think from every angle. What can it be? Is it an opportunity? Is it a problem? Who does it affect? How do I use it? How well is it needed? All of these questions is what free thinking is to me. Because if you don't question it, fellowship becomes your life. Me none of that.
Yeah. So I guess that concludes it. Free thinking should come with responsibility.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for joining the Daily Dose podcast. This is the Free
Pleasure.
Thinker segment. Mariama, Mr. X,
Thank you.
thank you for joining us.